Using centers in elementary music has a ton of different benefits, including but not limited to the fact that you can use differentiation easily in elementary music centers. So in this video, we're gonna be talking about how you can differentiate with your elementary music centers. If you're like, I don't even know how to differentiate, I don't even know what that means. We're gonna talk about all those things in this video. Now, if you are wanting to get started with centers, I'm gonna link a centers freebie down below that is a nice 12-page PDF that talks about a whole bunch of different ideas for music centers, a lot of which can easily be differentiated up or down so you can accommodate the level of your students as you go through elementary music centers. So I'll link that down below. Definitely grab that, definitely hit the subscribe button, and let's get started. All right, so when it comes to differentiation in music centers, first of all, what is differentiation? Differentiation just means that you are changing the lesson according to students' skill levels. This is important in education in general, but especially in elementary music because I don't know about you, but sometimes I get students who come from like really amazing music programs, and sometimes I get students who come from other schools who don't know anything because they have not had a music teacher or they didn't, you know, whatever the reason is, they'll come to me and they don't know anything. So if we're over here working on like syncopa in 5th grade and they don't even know what quarter and eighth notes are, like we've got a big gap in there because there's just so many different levels throughout the year. So centers is how I like to kind of help close that gap by differentiating and really making sure that we are getting ourselves together, or just those students who, you know, take a little bit of extra love and care in order to get up to the standard that you would like your students to be at. So that's what differentiation is and why it is important. And now let's get into how you actually differentiate in music. So the first step in differentiation is going to be to figure out your data. And by that, I really just mean figure out the levels that your kids are on. So figure out, you know, are they understanding the concepts we're working on? Are they not understanding the concepts we're working on? And by that, you need some sort of assessment or activity that you can use as data. This can be an exit ticket. This can be just something you observe. This can be an actual like formal assessment. However you want to do it is fine. But the idea being that it gives you data on where your students are at this moment. So a couple of easy ways to do this. You could put some questions on the board. So for example, if you're working on treble clef, put a note on the treble clef on the board and then have the kids, like you could do different pieces of paper that have different letters or like a whiteboard and have them show you what letter it is, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. Another thing you could do is have a question, have 2 different answers. So I love to do this with my solfege games. I'll pop them up on the screen and then I'll have 2 questions and it'll say like, okay, which one of these says so me, and the kids just show me on their fingers, is it number 1 or is it number 2? And they put it right here so only I can see, and a lot of times they'll like cover it up until I look at them, which is hilarious. But that's all I need, and then I can write down this person's got it right, this person's got it right, this person's got it right, and so on and so forth. Now with things like that, I will say only take a couple at a time because they'll start looking around to see, you know, what the other kids see, and if you see them looking around, also write that down because that usually means that they don't know. But you can quickly see who is understanding and who is not understanding in that way. You can have students write on whiteboards or write on actual paper different rhythms that you say. You can do like dictation, and that's going to show you, you know, where the students are if they recognize the different rhythms. Or you can actually do like tests or exit tickets. I have a whole set of assessments for rhythm in my TPT shop. There's solfege ones coming soon. They might already be out. I'm not sure when this video is coming out. I'm filming really far in advance, which is excellent, but it comes with the caveat of I have no idea when anything's actually going out. So there may or may not also be solfege assessments. You could also use like color by note. You can use all these different things. So I'll link those down below in the description if you want to grab some that are just like easy to use. But using whatever it is, figure out how they did, grade them, and then you can move on to step number 2. Step number 2 is to sort your kids into groups. So I usually do this in a very simplified manner. I use my iPad actually for my seating chart, and so I will just make a page next to my seating chart. I used to literally flip their seating chart upside down and do this, and that works great too. And so when you're doing that, all I do is I do an X, a line, and a check. Check are students that got every single thing right, correct the very first time. Lines are maybe like they got half of them right, they got some of them right, but they're not quite there. And then an X is like we need a lot of extra help. and I sort them out that way. Once you have the kids into like thirds, then you can sort them into actual groups. So however many groups you're gonna have in your centers, that's how many groups you're gonna do. I always have 6 groups, so I just split that into 2 and adjust them for numbers. So you might only have like 3 kids who have already got this concept. If they can be in a group by themselves, great. You might have to add some of the lines to some of the check marks, and that's fine too. Just kind of arrange them so that it's the correct number of groups. It's easier to do like an X and a line together than like an X and a check together. Although I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I do put an X and a check together, because sometimes if you can get a student who's a little bit lower with some students who are really on it, they can help them, but you just kind of need to know your kids and know if that's gonna work or not. Alas, for differentiation, I would suggest keeping them as close to their level as possible so that you can, you know, easily differentiate that way. This is not like an all or nothing kind of thing. You don't need to stress about it. Just do your best, do it quickly, and you can always adjust it later. So don't overthink this step. But while you are here, do make sure that you look through and make sure that there's not anybody who can't be together, because we all have those students that are not allowed to be anywhere near each other. So make sure that they are not near each other in centers and they are on opposite sides of the room, even if it means taking them out of their level. I'm okay with that if it's gonna keep the peace. Now, once you have that, the next step is to think about the complexity of your activities. So when you're looking at activities that you're differentiating, you don't want to make it more of the same. You want to make it more complex or less complex. Not necessarily more or less difficult, but more or less complex. So think about Bloom's taxonomy. I'll link some stuff about that down below if you know, forgot all those things we learned in education class. But in Bloom's taxonomy, they talk about the levels of understanding going all the way up. So the levels being remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. So while you're looking at your activities, if students have to remember something, that's always going to be simpler than if they have to create something. Or if they just need to understand how something works, that's gonna be easier than evaluating somebody else's performance or something like that. So keep those in mind, and again, I'll link an article about it down below to help you with that as you're looking at your activities. Now, there's 2 different ways that I really differentiate in my centers. Some is in the kids station and some is in the teacher station. So let's talk about the kids station first. In the students stations, that's the stations there where they are without me, then I can differentiate a couple of different ways. Now, you can do it in a way that like maybe each group has a slightly different activity, or maybe you have like 2 sides of the room and this side has this version and this version. This side has this version. Those things are totally cool. The easier thing to do is to just have kids pick their activities in the students section. Okay, hear me out. This helps because it also helps them to gain a little bit of confidence, and sometimes kids will choose the harder thing just because it seems like more fun. So a couple of examples of that. You can have 2 different sets of worksheets. So I'm thinking, I did one recently where I had a song we had learned and they were just like identifying each of the different rhythms. So like it was like circle all the quarter notes, box all the eighth notes. And then another one where they had to write measures of rhythms with the correct meters. Okay, so that's 2 different options. Or you can have them add up how many beats are in the measure, create their own rhythms with the correct beats in the measure. Okay. For treble clef, you could have them identifying like 1 note at a time, or have them identifying like a whole word at a time, like, you know, B-E-A-D. You can do that on the treble clef because it's A through G. Or you can have it as like a simplistic, like just identify, and then you can have another one where students are putting the notes on the staff. Like those are different ways that you can do that. You can have 2 different worksheets and you can tell them, here's the easier one, here's the harder one, you may pick your choice. Or you can have them come to you and you can hand them the one that is at their level. Either way, however you want to do that. Another way to do this is if you are like maybe writing rhythms on whiteboards, you can have some flashcards there so that they can use the flashcards to copy, or they can put some flashcards together as kind of an accommodation in their rhythm creating, because they don't have to create the whole thing, they just have to like stick them together, and then copy that onto their whiteboard. Or you can have them make up their own rhythm on the whiteboard. So that's two different ways that you can do that. Or you could have students come up with their own rhythms with manipulatives, with whiteboards, whatever. You can have them come up with their own, or you can have them work with a partner and do like dictation, where one student tells the other student what it is, because that's harder than coming up with your own. Even though Bloom says that creating is the highest, but dictation is way harder. Dictation is the hardest of all the things, I would like to say. Have on the record there. For solfege, you could have students make up their own patterns where they have to come up with, you know, like so me, and put that on the staff. Or you could already have the pattern, just like SM, and have the kids put the notes on the staff. So that way they have to come up with their own, or they just have to understand enough to put it on the staff. You can have students make up a rhythm or melody, and then they can write it and also play it. This is natural. Like in music, there's a lot of just natural differentiating, because students are going to write rhythms that they can play. Okay, if they can't write it, they're probably not going to play it, or they might try and it won't work. But if they're writing their own rhythms, they're going to come up with ones that are at their level, so they're only going to use the rhythms that they can use, which means that they're differentiating for themselves. And again, with the treble clef, you can have students do just one note or a whole word at a time. You could have, you know, identifying the note on the staff versus putting the note on the staff, that when you just give them a letter. Like there's a lot of different things like that that are pretty easy that you can differentiate. You can also do differentiation in the teacher group, which is the main thing that I do. So I always have a teacher group when we do centers, and we always have some kind of activity that can be easily leveled for the students. So here's an example of how I would take one activity and change it to make it harder and harder and harder, or more and more and more complex. So the like beginning part being, I say the name of a rhythm and the students just hold up whichever rhythm I say. So like a quarter note, hold up a quarter note. Then you can do, I say a rhythm and students create the rhythm with manipulatives. So they have, you know, little quarter and eighth notes, and I say ti-ti-ta, and they write down ti-ti-ta, ti-ti-ta. Okay. Then you could have students come up with rhythms in partners and make them with their manipulatives. And then you could have students come up with their own patterns and play them on the instruments, because now not only are they coming up with their own patterns, but they're playing them on an instrument, so they're applying more complex ideas to it. And that's 4 different ways you can do one activity. The same thing goes with like solfege patterns. If we're doing solfege patterns, then at first I might have some patterns and ask the kids to tell me what it says, and we might sing through a few. And then the next step would be, can you help me put this pattern on the staff? Okay. And then the next step would be, I'm like, let's together put this pattern on the staff. So where's so gonna go? And they, you know, draw it on there. And then the next step would be, here's a pattern, go for it. The next step could be, make up your own pattern and go for it. And then the next step would be, make up your own pattern and play it on the xylophone. And that's like a bajillion different steps that you can go, and you don't have to do all of those. Usually I just take 3. And those are the 3 that we do. And a lot of times I don't even think about it. It just kind of happens as you're talking to the kids. You automatically make it easier or less complex. So again, think about complexity, and also think about amount of help. So you could keep a similar activity and just have the kids, like I mentioned, the kids helping me put it on the staff versus me helping them put it on the staff, versus being like, here, go for it. Those are all different levels of complexity because the students are required to do different things, but it's the same activity. When you do this, make it easier for yourself. Don't have like 7,000 different activities. Use the same materials and the same activity, just make it a little more complex or a little bit less complex. Now the last step for differentiation in centers is kind of like a bonus one, because I didn't put this in the blog post, but would be to write down as students are in front of you how they're doing. So are they understanding it now? Are they needing more help? Is someone really lagging? And in that small group setting, you can really tell, like, oh, this kid writes all his rhythms backwards, or, you know, like things like that that you wouldn't notice when there's 30 of them. So take advantage of this to just like literally write on some sticky notes, write on their seating chart and erase it later, but just count those things in your mind so that you're aware of what is going on with your students. This is the perfect opportunity to make sure that you are aware of what's going on with your students. So make sure you take it and get going. And let me know how it goes by commenting down below or sending me a message over at Becca's Music Room on Instagram if you still have more questions. Thanks for watching. Bye.